Hello everyone and welcome to the React Native Academy. In this tutorial we will build the iOS stopwatch application in React Native. The app consists of three screens. On the initial screen you can see the timer set to zeros and the two buttons, the lap button and the start button. The lap button is disabled until you start the timer with the start button. Once it is running, you can press the lap to measure the split times. When there are at least 3 laps, the slowest and the fastest lap are highlighted. The current lap increases in real time together with the main timer. When the stopwatch is running, you can stop it. From here you can resume or reset. Reset brings you back to the initial screen. We will refer to this design during development to pick the colors and make sure that our app resembles the original iOS stopwatch application. Before we start the implementation, let's make a quick thinking in React exercise. When you start a development project, usually you get some kind of mockups or designs. The first step is to break them down into the components that might be needed in your application. The best way to identify components is to think about their responsibility. Each component should ideally do one thing. If it does more, it should be split into more specific components. You can also take a look at the data displayed in the app. Each component should present a single piece of data. I mark the components with rectangles. Let's give them some meaningful names and discuss their responsibility. App is the top-level component. It houses all the other components. Timer displays the current time measurement. Buttons row display individual buttons and arrange them horizontally. Round button is a component for the circle button. Now we've got laps table, which is a scrollable list of individual laps. Each lap component displays a single time measurement. We've got our components identified, so let's start the development by creating a project with the Create React Native App tool. So I type Create React Native App and then name of our application, which is Stopwatch. It might take a couple of minutes for the app to be created, so let's time travel. Okay, the app is created and I can enter the project folder and start the packager by typing yarn start. The packager bundles all the sources together. It builds the app and starts the development server. In the meantime, let's open my code editor. App.js is the entry point for our application. We will start implementation here. Okay, I can also see that the packager has started, so I am ready to start the iOS emulator by pressing I. Now, as the app is running, let's think about the data model that represents the application data. It will be used to develop a static version of the application that renders the user interface. We need a minimum data model at this moment. It will probably evolve over time and go into component state. But now, for simplicity, I will store it as a constant inside app.js. So I tap const data equals timer. Let's give it some sample value and laps. Again, I will enter some values. We have the main timer here. It displays duration of time. We will store it as a number of milliseconds between starting the timer and current time. Next, we've got a list of laps. We will store them as an array in the very same format as milliseconds representing time intervals. We will start the development with a static application that renders the user interface based on the data we define here. Our app should only take the data and display it, without any interactions from a user. We will start with a static application that displays the data that we defined in a data constant. Our app should just take this data and display it without any interactions from a user. First, I clean the code by removing the semicolons. They are totally optional in JavaScript, and for me, not using them makes the code more clear and readable. This is a matter of personal preference, so just make a choice and stay consistent. Next, I remove the contents of the app component and import the component directly to have simpler extents form. Okay, now I will modify the style of app component. Styles in React Native are written in JavaScript. The syntax is similar to CSS, but there are some differences. For instance, the styles are not inherited by child components. I remove justify content as I don't want the content to be centered vertically. I will also change background of the app to the dark color of our original app. So I will pick this color and paste it here. It's time to implement the timer component. It will be a functional component that takes a single property, the time reading. So function timer takes a single parameter interval, and from here I return just a single text element that displays the reading. Now I add the timer to the app component, timer, and set the interval property to data timer. You can see that nothing has changed because the default text color in React Native is black. Let's add some styling to the timer. So I set style to styles timer, and now I define timer. First, color will be white. Okay, let's make it bigger. And thinner. So I set font weight to 200. I will add also some space above the timer by setting top padding property of the app components. So padding top, let's make it 100 or a bit more, 130. I could either set the padding top inside the app or top margin of the timer, but it's better when the parent component arranges its children. This way we might use the timer in other places of the application. The timer looks good, but it renders the interval just as a number of milliseconds. We need to parse it into minutes, seconds, and fractions of the second. I will use Moment library for that. Moment is the most popular JavaScript library to parse and manipulate dates. So let's import it, yarn add moment. Next I will import it, so import moment from moment and use it inside the timer component to parse the milliseconds. So const duration is equal to moment duration, and I pass interval as a parameter. Now instead of interval I can get the exact minutes, seconds and centiseconds. So let's split it into two lines, and now duration, minutes. Okay, then duration seconds, good, and duration milliseconds. Okay, I also wrap text component in parents because it spans multiple lines, and this way it's a bit more readable. Okay, it looks good, but I only want 2 decimal places after number of seconds. So I will divide number of milliseconds by 10, so const centiseconds is equal to this divided by 10, and I plug it here. Okay, we don't need this 0.7, so I will round it. Now the timer component is done. In the next step, I will display a row with 2 buttons. Let's start with a single button. It will be implemented as a round button functional component. So function round button. It has 3 properties: a title, a text color, and a background color. I start with returning a single view component. Title is displayed with a text component, so title, and color is passed as an inline style to this text component, so style is equal, it's now just color. Okay, now I can add the round button and display it below the timer component. Round button, I set title to start, and I pick the colors from the designs. So first the text color, and now the background. Okay, now I will pass the background to the style of the view or component that wraps the title. The corresponding style property is background color, and I set this value to background. Okay, you can see the dark green background. Let's add some more styles to make the button looks like on our designs. I place it in square brackets to make it work together with the inline style I set for the background color. Now let's call it styles button. Let's define it. Okay, let's make the button 80 by 80. Okay, good. Now to make it round, I set border radius to 40, which is half of its size. So 40. Okay, good. Now I need to center the title vertically and horizontally. So justify content center and align items center. Okay, now let's make this text a little bigger. So again, I put the square brackets here and add a style definition. So styles button title, comma, color. Button title, let's start with